Hey, welcome back, everybody. Good Sunday. Hopefully, we're having an all right weekend out there and hopefully beginning that recovery process through much of Florida, Georgia, and the Carolinas as what was once Helene has kind of dissipated here, although still some active weather left over in that part of the country as the remnants kind of continue to just spin over the Tennessee River Valley. And that, unfortunately, will continue to bring active weather through the next couple of days. But now, really, all eyes turn, unfortunately, right back to the Gulf of Mexico and Caribbean. Where we are watching the potential of another storm to develop. Now, I'll go ahead and preface this right off the bat. For you folks in the Carolinas, Tennessee, and Kentucky, and Virginia, in that area that were hit hard by Helene, I really don't think this is going to be your storm. So that's kind of the good news. Unfortunately, you folks further to the south, back through the west coast of Florida, this one could be round two, and intensity-wise, is still really up in the air. We don't really know a whole lot yet in that department, but again, I'll show you what we do know and give you the latest information. Now, if you're new here and you haven't already subscribed, please do so. Like the video, comment, let me know where you're watching from. Share it with somebody here into the Gulf Coast that may need this information. Because if there's anything Helene taught us, getting the word out beforehand is a very useful tool in helping to save lives. So again, just kind of consider doing that. All right, let's go ahead and start here then. With all of that said, we will start with infrared satellite loop here over the Atlantic, and I'm going to circle a couple places here. In fact, let me actually pull up something real quick. All right, sorry about that. I do need the hurricane name list because I keep forgetting to pull this up before the videos, and that would be pretty helpful to know. All right, so again, though, up here into the North Atlantic, we do have what is Hurricane Isaac. So the good news here is Isaac is moving on out of here, not going to be a problem to anybody. Also, we get to use up that dreaded I name without it impacting anybody, which is always a useful thing as well. Now, we do also have Tropical Storm Joyce down here to the south into the main development region of the Atlantic. This storm not really going to be a problem for anybody as well. It kind of dissipate pretty quickly. Now, what we do need to watch is specifically this kind of area of thunderstorm activity you're seeing over the Caribbean. This, combined with some energy already hanging around portions of the Caribbean, is going to kind of get picked up here and scooped up towards the Gulf of Mexico throughout the next couple of days, and that's whenever we're watching for the potential of some sort of development. Also watching for development out here in the main development region of the Atlantic, a couple separate waves actually that could try to maybe merge together and form into a pretty powerful hurricane. We'll talk about that one as well. All right, latest from the National Hurricane Center. Again, Isaac, not a problem for anybody. Joyce, not a problem for anybody. What could be a problem is this area in the Gulf of Mexico, tagged with a 50% chance of development within the next 7 days here. Unfortunately, again, a lot of the models latching on to the potential for this one to become a named storm. Now, behind that, we do also have areas to watch, like I mentioned, in the main development region. Specifically, that red area very likely to develop. Another area right behind it. And there's a good shot that these two areas kind of merge together as one storm eventually, and then hopefully pull on out to sea. And we'll take a look at that in the model guidance here in just a moment. But let's very quickly touch on Isaac and Joyce. Again, just to show you the track here, this is Isaac, Hurricane Isaac, up into the North Atlantic. Not a problem for anybody. You'll notice a Category 1 storm currently, and the track just takes us all the way up into the North Atlantic and eventually even out towards Iceland as a post-tropical system. And again, just not bringing any issues. Now, Joyce, if I kind of zoom in on Joyce here, really a shell of a tropical system here. You can see this kind of open swirl indicating big time wind shear and some dry air that has really disrupted that storm system and is expected to dissipate here out over the middle of the Atlantic really as soon as sometime early this week. They're calling for Tuesday this to become a remnant low, or just meaning it's not a storm anymore, is what that means. All right, now, as for this area, you'll notice, again, looking at satellite, this definitely has that look. I'm not exactly sure. Maybe it tells me what INVEST number this is. Let's see here. INVEST 90L, yeah. So a 80% chance of development within the next 7 days. I think it's very likely that this does develop. I would be shocked if it doesn't. Just looking at it on satellite, it very well may already be near tropical storm status. But the good news here is you get the general idea here. Just looking at the path of, not the cone, but the area of development, this already is kind of starting to curve here, which is generally a good sign. And we'll take a look at some models. Area behind it, you'll notice, again, another area of some kind of disorganized showers and storms here just off the coast of Africa. And again, I'll show you in the models, but there's a chance these two kind of merge together and become one storm, or this one develops first, then this one develops behind it, and then gets kind of killed off by the bigger one. But either way, I kind of consider this just one area as a whole to watch. All right, so let's go ahead and dive into that one area to watch and take a look at some model guidance. So latest GFS that just ran this morning, we will move this ahead into time, and this is this afternoon. I'll go ahead and circle a couple areas. This is Joyce, again, that system that's dying out. This is Invest 90L, and then this is the area to watch right behind 90L. So again, Joyce, not a problem. We don't need to watch that. So really just watch these two down to the south here near the Cabo Verde Islands. All right, we move this into the week ahead, and you'll notice 90L really forms, gets its act together, becomes a tropical storm by tonight or tomorrow, and then continues to strengthen here through the week, and then behind it, we get another storm to form. So just looking at the names here, let's see if we have that pulled up still. Yeah, so this would be Kirk that would develop here, and then behind it would be Leslie potentially that could develop later this week, unless that system in the Gulf takes the name first. But I think this is very likely to become Kirk, and Kirk likely to be a hurricane, possibly a major hurricane here on down the road, and you'll see that unfold. So again, both of those systems, but 90L or the first system, a much larger and stronger system, and because of that, as we move this ahead into time, as this moves through the Atlantic, kind of absorbs the smaller storm behind it, and by the time we get a week or so out from now, we've got a big time major hurricane parked right over the central Atlantic. But again, you'll notice the good news is this curving north, already well north of the latitude of the Antilles, getting up towards the latitude of the Bahamas, and continuing its journey on out to sea here. And besides rough seas and transportation problems for any kind of boats out here, not really a problem to anybody. And then eventually gets pulled up into the North Atlantic and maybe goes through the Azores in 10 or so days. But again, we'll talk about that when we get a little bit closer, assuming that nothing else crazy is happening. All right, some ensembles here for this, and again, just to kind of give you a frame of reference, these are the Cabo Verde Islands. These are the kind of Antilles here, and those surrounding islands there into the Caribbean. And you'll notice the storm kind of tracks right between the two. Doesn't make landfall. Really, none of the ensembles do. But again, very likely to become quite a powerful storm here. So, it will be quite interesting to see how that unfolds on satellite. But luckily, not a problem for anybody, and shouldn't see any kind of destructive weather from that one. All right, so that gets us to our area in the Gulf of Mexico that we're watching. And again, we kind of hate this because we just went through Helene. The good news, again, is I don't think this is going to be nearly as big of an inland threat as Helene was. Obviously, still watch it just to be on the safe side. But really, I would monitor this from Louisiana all the way down through the Florida Keys here. The main reason for that is kind of the track that we're going to see. Also, I'll mention there's the potential for a couple storms in the Gulf. I talked about that one area, but kind of the reason that this is a bit of a tough forecast is we have a bunch of areas of spin out here that are kind of fighting for dominance, if you will. So latest GFS, this is getting into Tuesday afternoon. Notice some vorticity here. We've got vorticity here. We have two areas of vorticity right in the Pacific that could kind of try to get sucked into the Atlantic here. So just a lot of spin around each other, and that can make the forecast tough because oftentimes when you get areas of vorticity this close to each other, it can kind of hamper development of the other areas of vorticity, and just knowing which one will be the dominant area of spin can be kind of tough to forecast. But the GFS, we move this ahead into time, and there's kind of two big areas that pop up here. This is Wednesday evening of this coming week. One area into the Western Gulf, one area into the Western Caribbean, and the GFS actually kind of tries to develop both of them. So you get a quick spin up there near the Texas-Louisiana Gulf Coast, again, a weak system, and then you get that second system that kind of pulls up through the Yucatan and Cuba Strait there, and then also tries to develop there near the state of Florida, but doesn't really do it in a strong way. And then we get 10 days out, and look at that, another area of vorticity showing up. So the Gulf of Mexico and the Caribbean is really just a hotbed right now for spin, and kind of predicting which area of spin becomes the dominant spin, and then exactly where it goes and how it interacts with all these other areas of spin is a tough thing to do. And the models are going to struggle a little bit here as they kind of try to figure this out. But again, conditions do appear to be favorable for some sort of storm system in the Gulf of Mexico. And I'll show it to you on the European as well. We'll move this ahead through the middle of this week. Again, noting kind of two main areas of spin, one in the Bay of Campeche and another into the Western Caribbean. And on the European, we move this ahead into time. And again, neither of these kind of fully develop until maybe finally about a week or so from now, but they kind of combine, and what happens is that slows the development process. It just gets this big elongated area of low pressure, which would be good news for us. Again, that would prevent this from becoming a super powerful storm, which obviously we don't want to see, but would still bring impacts to the state of Florida. And then the European as well, on the backside of that, tries to spin something up about 10 days from now there. In a similar region. So again, just a hotbed for vorticity right now, a hotbed for potential development in this part of the world. I'll show you the Canadian model as well, and then we'll look at some ensembles and kind of conditions for development here. The Canadian, again, similar, tries to develop this low pressure a little bit sooner and become a little bit more pronounced, and has about a week from now a tropical storm impacting the central west coast of Florida here, right through the Tampa Bay area, and then crosses into the Atlantic and then kind of pulls on out of here, which whenever we look at the ensembles, that's a pretty fair assessment from the Canadian model. So again, basically, the main goal I want you to know right now is there's less that we know than we do know. What we do know, there's areas of spin in the Caribbean and the Gulf. There's also relatively favorable environmental conditions, which I'll show you here. What we don't know is how strong is it going to be, when is it going to impact somebody potentially, and kind of where exactly will it impact. Although I think we've got a general idea of where it'll probably go. And again, we'll talk about that here with the track. All right, so how favorable are conditions for this to develop? Well, overall, I mean, pretty favorable. Now, not as favorable as the environment Helene was in, which obviously is a good thing, but there are a couple things that we're pointing to that could indicate that this may try to become something. So kind of basically to set it up here, the science, again, anytime you have air diverging aloft, that creates convergence at the surface, and generally it's favorable for low pressure. So anywhere you kind of see these arrows are kind of fanning out from one area, that is generally an area of divergence aloft. So kind of watch specifically this area down into the Caribbean. And this is that open wave that we just talked about. And what happens is this kind of moves up and over an area of vorticity that's already trying to get going down into the southern Caribbean, and it aids its development. So notice how that circle moves through the Caribbean, and then you get a little L that pops up. That's, again, that divergence aloft creating convergence at the surface, and then a storm tries to form. And as it does so, this is when conditions look pretty favorable. This is the middle of this week. And I mean, this is honestly just eerily similar to the setup that Helene started in. Again, I don't say that to scare you, because I don't think this will be another Helene strength-wise, and definitely don't think it'll be another Helene inland impact-wise. But again, we do have divergence aloft here, indicating that we could have favorable conditions for a storm to develop should that vorticity be able to become dominant. And you'll notice, again, also seeing that into the Bay of Campeche. So we got divergence in a couple different places. We'll see, again, how that impacts the forecast. But then this develops, or tries to develop at least. And then this is when things will be interesting. This is getting into later this week. You'll notice we still have this area of some lighter wind shear in here. So should a storm be able to form and get into the Gulf, it could again have a period of a couple days to really try to get its act together. But after that, the jet stream kind of works on through and really ramps up here in the week time frame. And that, luckily, you'll notice all these really strong winds over the southeast. This is going to heavily move the storm east and probably begin to shear it a little bit, which could help kind of decrease the intensity of it. But luckily, again, for you folks in the Carolinas and Georgia, you'll notice this kind of troughing at 200 millibars here, or well up into the atmosphere, is going to really bring very strong westerly winds across the southeast, which will really move the storm likely over Florida and then out to sea, compared to inland and then up through the Carolinas like we saw with Helene. So that's the good news. One other ingredient I'll show you here is moisture in the atmosphere. Again, green is favorable for development. Those more dry colors are less favorable for development. So again, the Caribbean, plenty moist enough to support a storm here, even the Gulf of Mexico in the long term. So I think, and then a week out from now, as that kind of front tries to swing on through, could bring some dry air. But overall, I think wind shear will be the bigger question. Moisture looks to be pretty abundant here on a lot of the models for this system. So overall speaking, again, a lot of favorable environmental conditions for development, which obviously we don't want to see. But because of that, if we take a look at some ensembles, starting with the GFS, notice we have a big cluster here of some ensembles that develop this down into the Caribbean, pull it up through the Yucatan and Cuba here through that strait, and then hook it hard east towards the Tampa Bay area. And kind of really just the west coast of Florida in general. So obviously anyone from Louisiana to Florida watch this, but I really think the state of Florida, unfortunately, again, could be under the gun for tropical development. And some of these do get this up into hurricane status. So, we need to watch it very carefully. And I don't want you to, get concerned or start packing things up, but we're just in that phase where you need to be aware. You need to watch the forecast. You need to stay tuned and see how things unfold. And the European ensembles, a little bit different. Again, they kind of developed that Bay of Campeche area much more than the Caribbean area. But nonetheless, still kind of eventually pull it eastbound here as those strong upper level winds move in and can move it at a pretty good clip here. So west coast of Florida specifically really needs to watch this one. And honestly, I'm getting deja vu even looking at these maps because it looks very similar to how Helene set up and kind of formed there. Again, though, not going to be a Helene inland, but for the state of Florida, do need to watch for the potential of more tropical storm or hurricane impacts within a week to 10 days. All right, let's go ahead and talk about what else is happening in the country, what's going to happen. Taking a look at water vapor loop, we still just have this big time spin here over the east central part of the country from the remnants of Helene. Other than that, things are relatively quiet across much of the country. Not a whole lot going on out there. We do have some, troughing out into the Pacific Northwest we'll watch for. That could bring some cooler air here on down the road. But right now, again, kind of calm outside of the remnants of Helene. Now looking at radar out west, not a lot happening, so we'll go ahead and zoom into the east. Like I mentioned, still seeing this upper level low over Kentucky and Tennessee, and because of that, I am expecting thunderstorm activity this afternoon, kind of in this region around the low pressure, and kind of that circled area on your map. We'll have the chance of a couple strong storms this afternoon and evening, and unfortunately, in some of the areas that were hit the hardest by Helene from flooding. Not what you want to see at all, but it is the forecast, and I'm not going to lie to you. So, again, need to watch for that this afternoon and evening. Watches, warnings, and advisories. The southeast obviously still just swamped with flood warnings as all of this water rushes back to the Atlantic Ocean. So make sure, that you are keeping up with kind of the flow of the water here and where it's going, as that could be a concern. Had some fog in eastern North Carolina this morning. Other than that, most of the watches and warnings are actually out into the Great Plains and up into the northern Rockies here, where we do have fire weather concerns and even some freeze warnings up here for some cooler nights. But no storm system specifically. Again, just it's that time of the year where wildfires can spread pretty easily out here. So if you're under a red flag warning, don't burn anything. Just go ahead and make it easy on your local firefighters and don't cause any problems for them. All right, latest high-resolution rapid refresh. This quite literally just ran while we were talking about all the other tropic stuff, so it'll be new for me and you to look at together. All right, this afternoon, again, kind of like I said, I expected a lot of thunderstorm activity here through much of the Ohio, Tennessee River Valley, and into the mid-Atlantic. I wouldn't be surprised. Some of these could try to become strong to severe. Nothing from the Storm Prediction Center specifically, but specifically through West Virginia, and the Carolinas. Some of these could have some strong straight-line winds. A little bit of a downburst potential, maybe even some hail. We do have some cold air aloft, so don't be surprised to see some small hail with some of this as well, but not expecting like a tornado outbreak or anything like that, luckily. Now it continues through this afternoon and evening. Luckily, though, by the time we're getting into tomorrow, this is the beginning of the end in a way. Now we'll see more storms tomorrow. Again, this upper level low is being very stubborn and kind of hanging around here. So more afternoon showers and storms. Again, a slight severe weather potential tomorrow afternoon for our Monday. But after that, the storm finally kind of phases offshore, gets that low pressure developing back over the Atlantic, and conditions should improve. And rain chances, again, still high here through Virginia, West Virginia, North Carolina, even down through the Delmarva, but improving back towards Kentucky, Tennessee, and the Western Carolinas by our Tuesday. So just have to get through today and tomorrow with afternoon thunderstorm activity. All right, what's coming on down the pipeline here? Well, we are expecting a bit of a change towards some meridional flow here. So again, you'll notice in the mid-Atlantic, there's our upper level low kind of moving on out of here. But look what's coming behind it. This is Tuesday morning. We've got some big time troughing here over portions of the north central plains, and that could bring a shower or a line of some showers and storms in front of it. But more importantly, look at this block of cold air behind it through the middle of the week. Now, not everybody's going to get in on this. This is not going to be a big sweeping cold front, but the northern tier of the country, Minnesota, Wisconsin, Michigan, by the middle of this week, eventually up through the northeast, could get a bit of a cool down out of it. And then potentially another big time trough develops here about a week or so out that kind of clips the northern tier of the country. So a lot of troughing, a lot of meridional flow indicating more stormy and cooler patterns, but it's kind of stuck up into Canada right now. Again, we're transitioning to winter, so it's that slow, kind of slow progression further south latitudinally. Is latitudinally a word? I don't think so. I think I just made that up. But latitude-wise, again, we're slowly getting these big troughs to dip further and further south as we go towards the winter months. And again, some of these are clipping the northern tier of the country. And even about 10 days out, the GFS really wants to bring a big-time trough, and with potentially even our first snow of the year into portions of the northeast. Again, that's 10 days out. But we'll watch it. The general idea, though, again, is for more of a kind of long wave look to the jet stream here. That meridional flow, again, just indicating more active weather and not so zonal here into the future. But through the next couple of days, again, it looks pretty boring, to say the least. All right, final thing I'll show you here, temperatures, and then we'll let you go. Some cooler weather, again, over Tennessee and Kentucky due to that cold pocket of air from that upper level low. That will eventually fade here. Warm air will kind of try to take back over, but you'll notice where we're seeing that cloud cover stays chilly through the mid-Atlantic. Everyone else, though, gets in on that warm air besides the middle of the week. Like I mentioned, that trough clipping some of us, getting us back down to average to slightly below average temperatures by the middle of the week. So watching for that, again, can make it feel a little bit more like fall. And then we get a warm up behind it, and then another kind of dumping of cold air here in the longer range. This is about 7 days from now. You'll notice, again, another trough of cold air helping cool us down some while it stays quite warm out west. And then that could be a theme. You'll notice more of these areas of blue just trying to swing on through. And then by the time we get really far out in the future, a whole lot of blue taking over the east. So I don't want you to think a big time cold front's coming for everybody, but I do see a change in the pattern towards a little bit more of a fall-like towards winter-like pattern here as we get deeper into October. Alrighty, folks, that's all I got for you. Again, if you have any questions, ask me in the comments. I do apologize. I was not very active in the comments yesterday. To be honest, I am still quite exhausted from that chase with Helene and still honestly kind of just trying to process the whole thing. So again, I'll get back to it, though, today. All right, have a wonderful rest of your Sunday, and I will see you all tomorrow.